Hell yeah. You made it to a bonus episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. So, surprise! These episodes are launched completely random in between our bi-weekly episodes. The bonus episodes are welcoming special guests that are innovating the paranormal field either with a new invention, idea, or proven theory. Not just folks with paranormal evidence. Hell, we all have that already. If you enjoy this episode and want to learn more or connect with our guest, be sure to check the show notes for all of their info. To stay focused on the guest, these episodes will be ad-free. If you are a candidate for becoming a guest on the podcast, reach out to us at storiesinthecemetery@gmail.com with subject line podcast guest, and we'll reach out if you can pique our interest. Let's get into our interview with Nick and Josh.
All right. Welcome back to a very special episode of Stories in the Cemetery. We are doing a bonus episode where we are bringing on a specialist, and this specialist just so happens to be related to me. So, Paul, why don't you kind of give a little bit of background, what you're doing for a living, give everybody some information.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Paul. I'm an avionics technical trainer for an aerospace company. I have a history in avionics or electronics for quite a while. I was in the Air Force before doing the job I work for now. I'm happy to just talk of theory a little bit and see if there's any input that might be interesting or useful for you guys.
I think what you're going to bring to the table is going to be very useful. So I'm just going to chime in. And yes, everybody, Nick from Stories in a Cemetery is here. Josh didn't even introduce me. I handed him the show, and he can't even introduce. Josh. Oh, what did my wife say earlier? Stop treating you like an employee. How about that? Paul, you're not in on the inside joke, but again, I'm sure Josh will fill you in later. But I'm very excited to have you on, man. Like, I know Josh, you and Josh have had some, talks about some of his paranormal theories. I have a few questions about, one of the ideas that I have, and maybe you can just bring some light to it. And
Right.
but Josh is going to lead the way with one of his theories, and I'm just going to kind of watch this shit unfold. This is going to be very interesting for me because Josh and I have been working together now for about a year, a little over a year and a half now, Josh. And to watch him interact with, obviously someone he knows, somebody he loves, and somebody he respects, to be able to kind of see what that looks like because we all know he doesn't respect me. He calls me the old guy all the time. And you're already laughing. It must be a thing.
That's what I call him. That's all right.
Oh,
Exactly.
We're the old guy now. Awesome. So, Josh, let's.
Yeah, now you're just super old.
I
No, I mean that's what I call you, Josh. You're the old guy in our relationship.
You don't even want it. Man, 90 is where we're up to with Josh. How old I am. So, Josh, where do you want to start with this? Like, which one of your theories are we throwing at him first?
I honestly, I was, I told you a little bit ago, I was really perplexed because I have taken Paul ghost hunting. He's gone with me, and it wasn't until the other day that he kind of told me that he's a bit of the skeptic of things on this. As I'm sitting there talking my paranormal theories and whatnot, he's like, "Oh, well, I'm more of a skeptic about all this, but in theory, if we're talking science," and I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Like, I've taken you ghost hunting and you're a skeptic?
Well,
So, I
that's
mean, I think it's kinda start with that.
it's a category I call the dragged husband, by the way. That's
Like we were discussing earlier, Josh, I am kind of a skeptic in the traditional sense of like just spirits in general being represented, I guess, like the way it is in pop culture. I don't think from personal experience, I've had a lot of experience with, the supernatural, whether it be like from personal experience in my childhood upbringing that I've shared with you as well, Josh. And I can bring some of that into this conversation if you'd like. But I do believe in spirituality. I do believe that there is some type of spiritual energy that may exist out there in the universe. Just maybe not the way that pop culture likes to usually represent it as like, like, ooh, ghosts that like make spooky sounds in the night. I think a lot of it comes down to some psychology and like just the way that we tend to perceive the world, and how that could be, manipulated by our thoughts and emotions. But I do still believe, like I said, there is more to existence than what we normally perceive on an everyday basis, whether that be through the regular lens that we see things through. I think a lot is filtered out subconsciously, and I think that there are people that can be more hypersensitive to maybe some stimuli in their environment, or changes in some type of fields, energy fields, that not everybody is as sensitive to or as aware of. It's just, I don't know. I struggle back and forth, which is like my scientific understanding of things and like my longing to believe in, like ghosts. But I do believe that there are different planes of existence that do exist, maybe overlapping each other, and some people can perceive it more than others. And overall, I do believe in spirituality. So I'm not like, a complete skeptic, but I am, I guess, overly cautious when I come to try to believe in, I guess, some of the things that I've seen and or heard about. And I just usually try to approach things with a more scientific lens, and try to, I guess, filter out what I think is possible just based off of like what I've come to learn about, like whether it be psychology or physics, and try to rule things out that way as far as like the process of elimination of what I think is possible.
So two things in that I absolutely loved. First off, we're not big fans of the Hollywood stuff either, which is
Yeah.
kind of the way why Josh and I do the things that we do. And secondly, the phrase that you said was longing to believe. I run into a lot of folks that they're on the opposite side of the way you are. They're not like any type of skeptic at all, and everything is a ghost because they long to believe that it actually was a ghost. And then that's where I come into play and say, that's kind of a stretch, like, or nope, that's just not the way that shit goes. So again, that longing to believe, that was a huge phrase right there. Like, love that. Like, I'm gonna write that shit down and quote you at some point in time.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I absolutely love the I guess the perception that you're bringing to the table here. And I think we wanted to point that out that you are I don't want to say like fully blown skeptic, but somebody that you want the science and you want the why behind it. Like, how does this shit work? And then you're putting the logic behind it as well. So that's part of the reason why we're going to be hammering you with some questions today on some of these ideas that we have. So, Josh, take it away, man. What do you got?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it breaks it perfectly into some of the things I was talking about, because he talked about, like, different planes of existence. And part of my biggest theory is that EMF is the other plane of existence. And that when the soul leaves the body, the EMF field that is the field running through our nervous system is the soul. And that leaves our body, which is its capacitor. And now is kind of like free floating, looking for something to attach to, because it's looking for a new capacitor basically. So EMF is definitely a different plane of existence, and it's not something we can actually visibly see. And the closest we get is thermal imaging. So, like, what are your thoughts and ideas on, like, how I'm stating that? Does that make sense to you? Do you think
Uh,
that do you see flaws with it?
well, just to point out something that's probably obvious, but for anybody listening that may not be familiar with that term, EMF is usually referred to as like the electromagnetic field or electromagnetic frequency, depending on what context you put it in. But yeah, it actually has been scientifically proven and studied that the body is like a chemical electrical system, like a biological system, of course. But a lot of our neurons firing and everything that's happening in our brains is like a mixture of like a chemical process and an electrical process. And I personally choose to adopt the theory that um, electromagnetism is kind of a byproduct, or is directly connected in some way to like just electricity and energy. So yeah, there has been studies showing that the body is, energized with electricity, whether that be from a chemical or biological process, or not. It's still debated. Like I think that some of it is very much written in fact, but anytime you have an electrical energy present, there's going to be some manipulation of like some type of magnetic field that is generated. And it is detectable in the human body. Like all of our human bodies have different resistance values. And yes, you can like actually measure like the field that your body is outputting. And they have actually done studies before. I would have to like look up and like to quote the exact study of like that electrical actual like presence kind of dissipating or leaving the body when somebody passes. They tried measuring actually the weight of somebody's body to see if, like, with a really sensitive scale, if they can see any measurable weight difference as well from a human body's perspective of once somebody's alive versus when they just pass. And they did actually discover like a very, very like at the moment of death, like a very, 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 very like small and hard to detect change. So whether that actual study was legitimate or not is still debated heavily, and so same with a lot of the theories surrounding consciousness. It's a very complex topic, but I do think that there is enough grounds for debate, at least, on what is actually happening. What is like is energy connected to consciousness in any way, and is there a way to measure whatever that conscious spirit or energy is, and if it's something that's only with us when we're alive, or always ever present. Yeah, it's interesting to me, and it's something that I'm open to entertaining and debating about.
Yeah, so that scientist was actually his name is Duncan MacDougall,
Oh,
and he said that the soul weighs 21 grams. However, he obviously didn't have a whole lot of people to weigh as they died,
I was gonna say
and a lot of people
21 grams is
consider it.
actually pretty significant too, just to point that out.
Yeah, so and he a lot of people actually consider it to be a flawed experiment.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that's the
point
thing,
something
like
out here
something like that. Go ahead.
about grams. When you said grams, I mean, I weigh my dog's food. They all get a different, measurement of food. It's not that we just take a cup of food and pour it. Like my wife works with animals every day, so and she's also going to school, to learn more about nutritional values for dogs. So we weigh everything. And you're correct. So with 21 grams, like that's pretty significant. Like that's
Yeah, you sure it's not micrograms or something else?
What I am reading, it says 1907. He said that the soul weighed approximately 21 grams and or 3/4 of an ounce.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, they also is studies, right, that show that it's pretty common for people to pass their bowels at the moment of death, so maybe that's what he was measuring that time.
Right? He
possible.
measured a fart.
Hey, even
So
21 grams of your fart is pretty impressive. So one way or another, I'm
right.
impressed.
Yeah, it's funny enough that that's one of my next it's one of my next episodes that I'm looking at recording. That'll be
Oh,
out
your
by the time
farts?
this actually probably
Hey,
comes
yeah.
out.
Are you
Is
measuring farts, Josh? Like, what are you doing?
I'm actually going to be talking about Duncan, the professor that tried to weigh the human soul.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
I was going
Yeah.
to look at yeah, I'm going to be looking at like what if there's a weight to electricity and what that looks like if our EMF field like were to leave the body, if that would make a difference in weight. And then kind of talk about like his theories on it and see if there is actually any kind of science to back that.
Yeah, interesting that you bring that up because even though like there well, energy is like, usually measured in terms of like voltage or amperage or wattage. When you actually charge a battery with electricity, and whenever that battery is then depleted, there is a physical like weight change that takes place or that can be measured. Now, how significant that is, I can't quote off the top of my head, but there is actually a physical difference of weight in a battery that is fully charged versus not. So it's interesting that you bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I would have to figure out like how, basically, like how much battery do you have, like as a person? How much battery life do you have, and how many batteries could you charge? So I could somehow figure out how to balance out like this is what the electricity in your body weighs. Like we have to figure out like are you a 20 amp or a 10 amp? Like,
Josh, I can
Yeah.
actually,
Good
because
luck on
I
those
use
endeavors.
charge batteries. I could literally, and I have the right scales at home. I could weigh a fully charged 9-volt battery, and then deplete it, and then do another, weight on it to see if there's any type of difference, and that'll at least give you a very small scale. But
Yeah.
at least it would give you something to work with if that's actually a plausible idea.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I
like
mean, there's got to
there's
be
been
some
research already
way
done.
to
So they've done
tell.
experiments like that before, and it's documented for sure. But reperforming the experiment would definitely be interesting, seeing if you could reproduce a similar result. So I think a combination of like, yeah, basing it off of the studies that are the experiments that have been run before, and then trying to reproduce that would be really cool. As far as I remember, it was very, very like a small difference in weight. But it
Yeah.
is noticeable. It is measurable.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how much like wattage we carry, like like if somebody were to literally like be used as a battery, which by no means do I want somebody to go out there and kill your grandpa and hook him up to a car battery to see if he could charge it. Like nobody try any of this, please. But like how much would we technically be able to charge, based on if we were able to hook up to something to charge it? And does that also change with age? Like, does our EMF signal weaken as we get older, or does it stay the same? Because you're not supposed to be able to, you know, delete energy. It's supposed to just kind of stay stagnant. And it's obviously like I would think the issue with passing away is the rest of the body decaying around the electrical field. And that's why it continues to exist and moves on from the physical form.
Yeah, no, it's still very much adopted the theory that like energy cannot be created or destroyed. So energy is usually recycled or through entropy, dissipates in other ways. So, as far as like how much voltage and amperage the body can hold, that is again measurable. I think they have done studies before on like just measuring, the electrical frequencies and waves that are in our brains and going through our neurons and stuff like that. I think there is somewhat of an approximation on that, and I believe it's very low. I don't remember again the direct number, but it's a pretty low voltage. The body's very, very efficient. I think it has the capacity to hold probably a lot more energy than we normally use. Because we also have different parts of the body that use energy, right? So like we have the brain that has electricity traveling through it, but we also have different muscle groups that are firing with electricity, and we have organs and stuff like that that are using energy and actually consuming and using up that energy to digest our food and of course actuate our muscles and so yeah, there's a lot going on in our bodies, and again, everyone's body is very different as far as like how much resistance value we all have. That's actually partially how they do like a BMI check, right? Like, so they do the body mass
Mhm.
index by running voltage through us, and then capturing how much voltage drop there was, and then telling us, what the resistance value of our body, and based off of that, they can calculate your fat versus like muscle and like everything else content. So yeah, our body is very much a circuit, and it's an efficient one. But I think it's very, very variable depending on the person and their personal makeup. I think that's what makes it hard to quantify. You would need a very big pool of people to test, run tests with, and then try to see if there's, the hard part will definitely be eliminating all very unwanted variables out of the equation to make a good baseline to make an actual like solid claim of anything. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible and that people haven't tried it before. So I'm sure there's a lot of information about this kind of topic out there.
Hmm. I'll definitely be looking into it. I mean, it's fascinating, and like I said, this is
Definitely.
what I loved about talking the other day is we can go back and forth and do this for quite some time, and I'm actually learning quite a bit. And I feel like I get to kind of push the intellect you are able to carry around that I don't have. But we talked a little bit about my theory of creating the ghost trap to capture
Yeah.
the electrical field that I think passes through our body and does its own thing and becomes its own free floating bubble. And you brought up some really interesting things that went completely sci-fi on us. So I would love to kind of get into that and the whole like reverse tractor beam kind of thing talking about, because I'm like, of course, it has to be my concept that is not something we can technically make.
It's not that it's not possible. I do believe that, you know, at least man-made problems definitely always have man-made solutions, and it's just a matter of engineering. The problem that you're going to into the most, even though, like I said, like your theory can be, it's not like implausible. It can be plausible, and there theoretically could be a device made that can do something along the lines of what you're asking to make. The problem is that you would need an enormous amount of energy, I think, to create something strong enough to attract anything that would be, free floating around and isolating and just capturing that thing. But the real hard part would be, actually being able to prove that whatever you did manage to capture and store, whatever energy that you maybe did actually, contain in some type of container. Um, would be very hard to eliminate anything else outside of the like the normal things that are just surrounding us all the time as like contamination to the project or something that would make the project invalid. So it would be very hard provable product that actually a way to prove that what you're doing and what experiment you're running is actually what you're hoping will be. Because you have to eliminate all interference and all potential like capturing of just like the energy required to run the device. So yeah, it would need a lot of research and development, which costs a lot of money. That's the problem with a lot of projects like these. Research and development is usually a very heavy cost for any type of product. And then it's the means of actual production and getting the correct materials, which some materials are very hard to come by. Um, so you would need to do a lot of proof of concept and like really refining the actual problem that you're trying to solve and what kind of device would need to be created to do that type of function before actually being able to make a tangible product.
Mhm.
So what would be some of the contaminants that you mentioned? Like what else could be surrounding us that would essentially, debunk this idea?
Well, the really, really big problem is that everything around us is generating electricity all the time. And what I mean by that is that an electrical charge that can be measured is created anytime you have movement. So you have all the different particles that make up the atmosphere around us, the space around us, um, and everything else that is made up of matter, right? Particles. Now, when these particles are bouncing into each other and making, with friction, whether that be a fast-moving airflow or particles just in the environment or just like everyday objects, right? When you have that friction and that movement, you're actually generating an electrical potential, which can be like stored on, either a conductor of some kind, and you can be also stored on an insulator. So that's where you can get like a buildup of static potential, electrostatic energy, and that's how like a lot of science experiments are run. Like if you take two balloons, for example, like the rubber balloons, right, or latex in some cases, and you rub them together. Well, that friction and the interaction of those atoms are creating a pretty intense charge, and it can generate like hundreds of volts. And once that potential reaches a critical point, and it then gets close to something that's of an opposite charge, then you can actually see a discharge of that static potential that ionizes the air around it, and that's the actual spark that you see. So you can do this at home with like a bunch of different projects, different things. If you run a comb through your hair a bunch, right, just like really fast, just going crazy, and then you turn on your water faucet at home, you can run this experiment today or whenever. You can generate enough static potential, which has a pretty significant actual measurable electrical field, like a magnetic field, that when you turn on your faucet on a very low setting, where you just kind of have like a stream, a very small stream, and you put the comb close to it, it will actually take that stream that's just normally going downwards due to gravity, right? And when you get that charged comb next to it with enough potential, it'll actually bend the water and it will be attracted towards the comb without ever touching it. Um, so that's just to give you an idea, like how much static potential you can build with just everyday objects and like friction and movement. So that would be very hard to eliminate and just like actually start at close to zero energy potential. And in order to eliminate other things too, you would need to create some type of vacuum. so that you don't just have random particles bouncing into each other, generating a charge in that environment as well. So all of that stuff again is possible, but it's just very hard. And like we have things like the CERN particle accelerator experiment happening in I think it's either Sweden or Switzerland, somewhere in Europe, and they have these tubes that they're accelerating particles extremely fast, and then detecting new particles that
Oh,
we didn't
yes.
know existed before.
I did hear
Um,
about that. I want to say that's in Sweden. I think you're correct.
yeah, I think it is Sweden. It's one of those. And as you know, like that, to do that, to detect new particles that are very hard to detect, right? That only pop in and out of existence, as far as we understand it. Every so often, it's very rare to actually see them interact with anything. To actually measure that interaction that is happening all the time, it's just hard to detect. They needed to create like the world's biggest like electrical like particle accelerator that stretches for, I believe, meters, like a few meters. I forget the exact length. It's huge. And the actual electronics and like the engineering that goes into that is a marvel. Like it's a modern day marvel. And in order to detect what you're trying to talk about, you would need to, I think, create something potentially like of a downscale of that, just to be able to detect like small changes in either particle movement or some type of electrical change in a true vacuum, in order to again eliminate all other potential influences. And by trying to do this, like if you do manage to try to create something unique that is very sensitive to whatever it is that you're trying to detect, you may, and this happens all the time with engineering, it's pretty funny, you may actually discover something else. Like you may actually find some other potential like breakthrough of some type of science before actually getting to the solution of the answer you're looking for. This happens all the time. We discover things by accident by looking for something else all the time.
And I think,
Yeah.
the way
And I
Josh and I think back and forth, like we come across these ideas because we were bouncing shit off of each other, and it's just talking, or, me
Yeah.
sending Josh a very crude diagram of like, hey, what if we fucking work with this? And he's like, oh, well, that works with this theory. And we'll kind of bounce stuff off of each other just by, working it out, uh, by talking it through to see if it would actually come to fruition, if it's something that could be feasible. But yeah, I totally understand where you're gonna come across something else by trying to create something with an intent that is kinda like, "Oh, well, the intention's way off, but we have this new theory." I love that, and I think that's actually, I hate to say, like, the half-ass world of the paranormal right now anyway, and that's kinda like what we're finding. But that's kind of the shit we're going through is like, "Okay, we got this theory, but we came up with something new." So that's actually, something definitely for Josh and I to be looking forward to, when we do
yeah.
try to create any of these theories that we're throwing at you today. And for folks, in case you've forgotten or you haven't listened to previous episodes, that whole last, I don't know, 12 to 14 minutes or so was all in relation to Josh's ghost trap idea. So
Yeah.
again, most of the diehards will know like what that was referring to. But in case you're new to the show, we're trying to be Venkman and Egon over here and create an actual ghost trap to see if we can actually capture something so we can, I don't know, not just interview and question, but to kind of, study, like, what's a ghost made out of kind of
Yeah.
mentality.
Sorry, one
So
thing I'd like to bring
Yeah.
up real quick if I can.
sure.
Josh, you brought up to me the idea of creating some type of device that can sense changes in electromagnetic fields, right, in an environment, kind of like an EMF reader, right? But
Right.
using ferrofluid. I don't know if that was Nick, your idea.
Right. So this is
Um,
Nick's idea.
okay. Nick, do you mind if I talk about this a little bit? I don't know if you've
This is
talked about
actually
it.
where I was going next, so let's do it.
Yeah, so yeah, Josh shared with me that idea, and I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it could very well create a very cool product. I don't want to overshare like what that product would really be. Maybe we can discuss that on a private chat later. But essentially, you would just as a very general sense create a device using ferrofluid, which if anyone listening is not familiar with that, what that is, it's a fluid that contains like very small particles, I believe, of iron or some other metal that is suspended in some type of liquid that has some viscosity to it. So it's like kind of thick and it interacts with magnetism. So if you take a magnet to it, it will be attracted to it and it creates these really cool like spikes and things that are representative of the actual non-visible magnetic field that's present. Um, Now, because these ferrofluids, of course, exist in such a viscous state, exist in the form that they exist in, you would need a pretty strong change in a magnetic field to attract or move it at all. But you can, in theory, create a device that maybe detects small changes and then amplifies that and uses the ferrofluid to represent the direction of that change and the intensity of that change. And that's something that me and Josh privately like kind of bounce back and forth an idea of like how you could actually create something like that. And I think that even if like it won't necessarily prove anything, right? Or necessarily maybe even like do exactly what we want it to do, it would still create a very interesting product, and it still could potentially have a huge market in the ghost hunting field as like a tool that doesn't currently exist, at least from what I've looked up.
So what would we use to magnify the change? Like, explain that to me, because that doesn't make much sense in my brain just by
Yeah,
hearing it.
yeah, no worries. So like I said, some of the toys and things that people use ferrofluid for today
Hmm.
include just like a simple vial of the liquid suspended in some type of oil, like mineral oil, and so that the heavier fluid, the actual ferrofluid, is just kind of suspended in that, depending on its buoyancy. And then they take a magnet, and then wherever they move the magnet, the ferrofluid follows, and it gets attracted to it. But
Right.
in order for that to take place, the magnet needs to be, pretty strong. Like it doesn't need to be like the strongest magnet ever. It doesn't need to be like a necessarily relatively strong magnet to any other magnet. But still, that magnet and like the magnetic field that it's generating is a lot more than what you would normally be able to detect with something like an EMF reader. So usually, like the EMF readers are detecting much smaller changes, minute changes in the electromagnetic field and around it, and that's usually what you would detect if you take it out ghost hunting with you is very small changes. And like if you are talking about like a potential of energy being stored within our bodies, um, you would need something very sensitive to detect a small change, especially, just if it's outside in the open, and it's not that strong of a presence. So you could use something like the EMF circuitry, right? The things that are in the EMF detectors, and create some type of amplification device that can increase like pretty much what it's reading and intensity, and make it produce a stronger magnetic field based on its like actual change that it's detecting with its sensors, right? That is strong enough to actually manipulate the ferrofluid in some usable and measurable way or detectable way.
Okay, that's helpful. That means I need somebody that knows about the inner workings of that, like once you take them apart and how to actually get that to be amplified in order to make it, I guess, a visible type of product to hold, tool, device, whatever we want to call it, to actually watch that come to life.
Yeah,
And
sorry, I've actually like shared with Josh some beginning workings of a theoretical product and how it could potentially be constructed, at least in like from the early onset design aspects of it. So I could share that with you, or Josh, if you want, you can share that with him at a later time or whenever, and we can talk about like the actual feasibility of creating that product in reality, like, and what are the early stages of like development of something like that.
and we've discussed a little bit of this already. Where I mean, my original idea was to have this like almost like in a flat petri dish, and then we kind of like after he spoke with you, kind of came up with like this can go in a cylinder or some kind of sphere, to where it's a little bit more fluid into moving into different directions. I mean, literally 360 degrees instead of it just kind of maybe moving to one side or the other of a petri dish, and it actually made a lot more sense. And Josh, I think we even looked at like some glow in the dark fluid that it can actually go in,
Yeah.
so it can be used at night and not like charged or needs a light on it so you can see it. Because I mean, most ferrofluid or the ferrofluids I've seen are black, so it's obviously going to be hard to see. So we were kind of looking at like from a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher's perspective, on top of the science, on top of the design, like we kind of went into great detail of this, and I can't wait to see if there's anything further that Josh hasn't shared with me yet, like more recent conversations between the two of you, because it is something I would like to like test it, just kind of make prototype and take it out into the field and see what it does and see how it reacts and kind of take it from there. And if it becomes to something of fruition, obviously this is a project that can be very feasible. So pretty excited about that actually. Instead of Josh's ghost trap that is damn near I would say impossible to make.
It is
But
not impossible.
Not impossible.
So there was actually more to that I'll probably bring up in a minute, but to expand on the ferrofluid thing, and what would it take to kind of amplify a field? Like, could we just charge? Like, if we were to put the ferrofluid, say, in like a small ball, like a glass jar ball, and it was floating in the mineral oil, would we be able to just charge the outside surface of that to give it a
So
more conductive?
yeah, I wasn't sure exactly how far you wanted to go into this theory. So if you want
I
to
mean,
go
it's
there, then we can definitely go there. So the
well,
idea
what do you
that
think, Nick? I mean,
yeah.
it's your theory and your device. I mean, it's technically like we're talking about how to create it and make it. It's your theory, no matter what. But
true. And this kind of patents, I don't want to say patents it right away because this will be
in
published.
some way, shape, or form,
Right. Right. But I mean, I'm in the publishing world, so that's where my brain goes. But yeah, I mean, we can discuss it. I mean, if you're here to teach us, let's do it. Let's like, what can we do to charge this thing up? How do we amplify it?
Okay, well, if you're okay with sharing then that with the public, then the idea that I had was like you're saying, you can put the ferrofluid suspended in some type of oil, mineral oil, or something that will allow it to have some type of neutral buoyancy, so it kind of stays either in the center or somewhere adjacent to it. And then you could take again a few different arrays of sensors that the EMF detector already has in it, right? Like some type of EMF detector that you could repurpose some of the sensors and the circuitry for. And now the EMF detectors usually only are one directional, right? Like wherever you're pointing it, it's going to sense a change in that local field of
right?
sensibility that it has. But if you take a few of those and make it so that it can sense either omnidirectionally, or take a few of them and create it so that it's a much wider detector of small changes. Instead of having it, you can keep the lights if you want to, but instead of having it like have lights that pretty much indicate spikes and in intensity and changes of increases, I guess, in electromagnetism and the field around it, um, you can then, because it's amplifying the change that it's detecting, right? Already to make those lights go up. So you can just increase that amplitude um, enough to actually move what I would say is actually like an actual magnet. Um, that the magnet, as it moves position wherever the most intense field is present, will then pull that ferrofluid in that direction. So pretty much you would have a sensor that's sensing, changes, small changes to electromagnetic fields um, around its outer housing, right? And then you would have something increase the actual amplitude of that change in the circuitry enough to move an isolated and separate like magnet that's associated with that direction and also can change in it. It's whether it be a magnet or some type of just inductor that can change its intensity based off of the change that it's sensing, so that it can increase in intensity, so it can pull the ferrofluid stronger or less, so create bigger spikes or smaller spikes, and
Mhm.
also change in direction wherever that EMF change is being detected. The hard part would definitely be isolating those two things, right? So isolating whatever it's sensing in its environment around it from being interfered with by the actual device that's moving, that is generating a high magnetic field itself, so that it's not contaminated and interfered with and pulling the ferrofluid just in random directions. So yeah, like I said, that's just a rough draft of like a potential theory that you could use and base your design off of and create some type of art, like a prototype. Um, but you just have to really make sure that you're careful with the circuit design and whatever way you're going to isolate that, so that they're not interfering with each other and defeating its own purpose. But it is possible. I think that we can potentially make a product that works the way that we kind of envision it.
Now, the circuitry,
Now,
would it be easier to use a tri-field meter that uses obviously all three axes versus a K2 meter, which is only single axis?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely potentially an option that's worth exploring. Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
now, how strong of an EMF field do you really think we need to move the ferrofluid? Like, do we need something to amplify a current? Or would, like, if you were to arc a small little spike of electricity to the edge of the globe and the ferrofluid's floating in the middle, would it react to that?
Well, that would have to be experimented with, but as far as I understand, the way that the magnets they use to manipulate the ferrofluid, those magnets have magnetic properties that are strong enough to actually manipulate the ferrofluid and suspend it and pull it in different directions. And the magnetic field generated by different voltages and amplitude is pretty small and very much dissipated in its surrounding environment fairly quickly. So it would need to be a pretty strong, just like electromagnetic field um, in its surrounding area to actually pull that. Like that's why your outlets, even though they're charged, will not like hold a piece of metal against it. It's not at that magnetic. You know what I mean? But you can
Right.
increase that potential enough where it will then have a strong enough magnetic field to attract things to it. But that's why you would need some type of amplification device because I don't currently
Mhm.
think with my limited understanding on this specific topic that any like actual change in electromagnetic potential in your surrounding area that's usually detected by like an EMF reader of any kind is
Mhm.
strong enough to actually have a magnetic field that's going to pull or manipulate that ferrofluid in any significant way.
Yeah.
Even though it would be in a little
The
bit more of a buoyancy type of fluid, like if it was in an oil or something lighter than the ferrofluid itself.
Um, yeah, even then, only because as far as when I did some like limited research on this and seeing what already exists, all of the like the ferrofluid like in oil like devices or toys out there that I've seen, like always come with some type of magnet that the ferrofluid's just kind of like sitting either at the bottom or somewhere floating in the middle. And it's not until you use that magnet and like put it right up against the container does it actually attract the ferrofluid in any given direction. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah.
'Cause I mean,
And,
Nick
there's actually
walks
a
into
really
some
fun device.
areas
Sorry, what?
and Nick walks into areas where he gets, EMF fields that are reaching, 100 milligauss, and like how much, like that's where I think we really need to
You're gonna
kind
test
of
it.
figure out, like, is that enough for me to just walk out with this ball of ferrofluid and nothing else, and see like can it manipulate this without me having to amplify a signal?
Well, that's the fun part of, like, these experiments in science and research and
Yeah.
development as a whole, right? That you really will only be able to you can do a bunch of theory and, like, proof before you start messing with stuff, but when it comes to, like, none of us being actual, like, experts in any of this, I would say, would be fair, right? Like, we're not, like, professors or doctorates in any of this stuff right now. Um and actually know how to do the math and the proof and stuff like that. I think the best way for us to like learn anything is just by experimenting and physically manipulating and messing with this stuff or playing with it, right? So if any of you
Right.
guys can actually get a hold of some ferrofluid, which I've heard is actually fairly easy,
It is.
like some
Yeah.
some mineral oil
Mhm.
and stuff like that, you can put it in different vials and containers. Try to like mix in, we can do some research on how to create neutral buoyancy for ferrofluid to try to create, like I said, a neutrally buoyant environment for the ferrofluid to exist in, so that it kind of stays in an area, right? Like
Listen,
grouped together and not just like dissipated or flat. Once we can do that, then we can just start playing with it and messing with it and seeing how it interacts with its
Yeah.
environment.
love it.
Well, I definitely think we're
It's
all gonna end up with ferrofluid on our desks somewhere.
I think
Um,
even the listeners are gonna be like, "What the hell is ferrofluid? How do I get it?"
right? They're all
So
on Amazon right now
I
trying to
know.
predict or trying to do this experiment. They're all stealing Nick's theory right
Well,
now.
I don't think anybody has the patience nor the tenacity that I have towards something like this, where somebody tells me like, "Hey, it's possible." I'm like, "Well, shit, we're gonna try it, and if it takes me 2 years to get it right,
Mhm.
obviously I'm gonna take 2 years to get it right." I have the locations that I could test this at. I just need to get my hands on some ferrofluid, and like you said, the neutral buoyancy. Like I didn't even think of that. Like we were thinking of it like sitting in the bottom of like a full globe, type of container, and just sitting at the bottom and watching where it like picks up. Like where is it going to go to instead of it being, central to the globe, like the core of the earth kind of thing, and watch where it peaks out at. And that's we were thinking of the globe piece, but I mean, I could take. We talked, Josh and I, like just cheap Tupperware containers, clear, and just test this thing out, just to see what it'll actually do, as long as I can get the right size of where it's going to fit in my gear bag. Because I mean, there's a lot of shit in there right now that I take out on a nightly basis.
Yeah, the kind of design that I
Yeah.
was thinking would be maybe I guess easiest in application, because like getting all the ferrofluid to be, or like the fluid around it to be buoyant enough to like have it sit in the center
Mhm.
is possible, I think, but it would be very hard to achieve. Like it would have to take enormous amounts of trial and error, like, and maybe even like require some simulation, right? So like you can do some like fluid engineering and like simulate, the actual weight and density of that fluid, the ferrofluid, and then the surrounding fluid, and what it would take to actually get it to stay centered. But I think what is more achievable or attainable is just creating like you said, kind of like a petri dish that it can sit in, and then creating the surrounding fluid to be, I guess buoyant enough to keep it off of the sidewalls and kind of like attract it towards the center, but still sitting kind of like flat, centered
Mhm.
in that liquid. It's kind of like you would have like a compass,
Mhm.
um, and then you would be able to then you can create like a dome on the top so that it can not only like spike, in a 2D plane, but also up the vertical axis.
Nice.
Yeah, like it wouldn't be necessarily like a full sphere and suspended in the middle of that sphere, but you can create like kind of like a flat petri dish that has like a dome on the top with a very like bright white contrasting background, so that you can then see the fluid either pull in a specific 2D plane direction, and also up and vertically.
Like it. I love it. Love it. Well, Josh, you know what I'm doing once we get off this call. Uh,
Buying a lot of things on Amazon.
well, I mean,
Um,
not really a
your
whole lot.
wife's gonna love me. Your
Uh,
wife's gonna be like, "God damn it! Every time you talk to Josh,
he's
It's funny.
spending.
One
go
thing
on
that we were just
Amazon."
talking about at my job was there was a lot of like specialists and engineers that I was working with, and we were talking about how one of the most significant discoveries anyone can do when they're developing something new is really not underestimate the value of commercial off the shelf items, or COTS is what we call it. So before you I just was as a suggestion, before you go out and start buying all these independently like individual pieces, like piece parts, like the ferrofluid and like the container, and like looking into mineral oils and all these different things, try just finding exactly like what you want the final product to be, and getting the closest thing to it, and then just like modifying it from there, because that's actually one of the quickest ways, and the most, I think, like underrated ways of developing a product quickly. It's just taking something that already exists that's close to your idea, and then changing it slightly to like actually meet the final product design that you had as an intent.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Josh, we need to keep him around. Like, yeah, keep him
Good
on
thing
speed
we're
dial.
related.
Oh shit, you're related. That's cool.
Yeah. See,
So,
all the people in my family have smarticle particles. All right. We.
article particles.
Yeah, definitely love when you say that, Josh. That's great.
So that's the questions that I had for you, Paul. Josh, did you have any other crazy theories? Do we want to run my
You know,
magnet? Remember I told you that magnet theory that I had like a while ago? If that would actually
honestly,
work?
I don't know if I recall your magnet theory. I was gonna talk to him about he had brought up a crystal, I guess that absorbs energy, and
Okay.
I was like, well, can I just use that as a cheap ghost trap?
Well, I was just saying that like that's a potential way to like detect a small change in some type of stored energy, right? And it's like very much something that can be like very, very visually appealing and is already tied to spiritualism. Now, so there's certain crystals, right? They usually call them piezoelectric crystals, or there's a bunch of names for them, right? But there's crystals that can store energy and in some cases generate energy, depending on how they're manipulated by its environment. Like there's some crystals that if you hit them, they generate an energy and they sometimes even illuminate on impact, which is really interesting. There's crystals that, when you illuminate it with a light, like the photons actually can charge and build up the potential voltage in that actual crystal. And then there's a bunch of other types of crystals that, again, like can kind of just hold a charge or can be manipulated by its environment to hold some type of potential. So if you were to like create some type of Faraday cage, which would for like pretty much get out any outside of interference, and you already had a pre-measured value of what this potential was for this crystal inside of it, and you did a really good job at like eliminating any outside electricity that can get into this container, and then you just have it in there, and you do your investigation. Maybe ask questions and just have that with you, so you can measure the crystal's voltage potential beforehand, put it in the Faraday cage, and then like do whatever experiment that you're running, like ghost hunting stuff, and then take that crystal out and then measure it again to see like, okay, was there any change in this like actual potential here? But if your theory of spirits being represented by energy, right, or being energy itself, a Faraday cage would create something that, like, if it's true, like spirits are electrical, they would not be able to penetrate in that same theory, right? But they can, in theory, right, in your theory, can get trapped in something like a Faraday cage. And then, like, again, you can detect a change in that potential or whether that energy was present in some type of crystal that would potentially absorb whatever energy there is in its environment.
Gotcha. So I'm just gonna take a
Now,
box of
I'm
rocks.
paraphrasing here off of like, theories that I've like heard about or done some small research in the past. So all the stuff that we talked about, I just want to get out there that I'm not an expert in any of this. I may be demonstrably wrong in some of these areas, but it's just based off of my current like base knowledge and stuff that I have. Of course, a lot of this, when done with more rigorous research, probably is a lot more complex and has a lot more nuance than anything I've been able to discuss or verbally communicate thus far.
Interesting. Wow. This is like
Just nice to have more.
just a ton of information. I mean, I was taking notes through this show. Like lots of things to dive into. And I guess to end this, because we are running like a little short on time, and I'm sure Paul wants to get back to his family. The Josh, this was my magnet theory, and this was and this is going to be the dumbest. It might be the dumbest thing or the smartest thing I've ever said.
Okay.
So I basically took two horseshoe magnets and I faced them towards each other on opposite poles, and I separated them like I had something like holding them in place, and I took a full spectrum camera, and my theory was that I can create an orb if we let it sit there long enough. If the particles around it from pushing and pulling back and forth, it would basically create the falsified orb that everybody loves to call a ghost. And that was kind of like the theory that I had behind it. Although the magnets that I thought I ordered, which I thought I was getting, big freaking horseshoe magnets, no, they sent me toy magnets that were like this freaking big and weren't very strong. So again, I just don't think that my theory test would have even worked. I mean, I did test it. Like I let the camera run overnight, and I didn't have anything. And I thought just maybe if I could just see one little spark like show up in between them from a full spectrum camera, that I could disprove all of the orbs that show up in these people's photographs. Is that something feasible?
Um, uh, Potentially, I think with magnets, the stored energy in a magnet may not be powerful enough without some help. But there is actually a bunch of like, you just reminded me of an engineering video that I watched a while ago, where this very smart individual created like a vacuum glass tube and then I think like backfilled it with some type of gas. And then when he then had like a Tesla coil near it, which is like just pretty much something that can generate a lot of voltage potential, can charge the gas that was in that orb through the glass, and then create an actual plasma orb, which was super fun and super cool.
Wow.
And then like whenever he got it close to the actual like little Tesla coil that was charged and on and powered on, the ball intensity of like its glow would increase and decrease the further and like closer or further away it was.
Wow.
Again, that's just like kind of ionizing a gas though and creating a plasma. Which I don't know if that's like the kind of orbs that you are looking to detect. It would just be, just kind of like a fun experiment, like kind of like how fluorescence works, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think
But
Nick was kind of thinking small ball lightning.
yeah, I was going to say ball lightning is also a very interesting phenomenon that they've witnessed under very specific conditions. It's super rare, but like when lightning hits the ground and then somehow ionizes a certain area of the air and like creates a ball of actual plasma, which is the lightning, right? And just ionized atmosphere. And then it kind of just floats around before dissipating. It's so rare, in fact, that occurs that like there's very few documented firsthand cases of that, like actually provable at least. But it has been proven as possible, and it has been witnessed at least once before from a reputable source, at least. But yeah, using like a full spectrum camera, even like a low speed like camera, or like I guess I should say high speed camera that can catch like really like fast frame rates, would be interesting to like just mess around with, whether it be I think with like Tesla coils and how they interact with each other and like create corona discharges, or like with a magnet. But I think like having two rods that you can charge that have like coils wrapped around them, they can build up like significant voltage with some type of generator. Kind of like I said, like a Tesla coil. Would be more powerful and like more likely to create some type of result that you're looking for, rather than just regular magnets that you can buy.
Okay, and that's fair. See, this is why we brought you on. Anyway, so Josh, I mean, I think, like I said, we're getting close to that hour. I mean, he's brought a lot to light for us, for our listeners, obviously for our shopping lists. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's been just again, I took notes while we were here, like just on all three of those theories. So, obviously, it gives me things to look into, things to research, videos to watch, throwing gum at the wall and seeing what sticks. This way we have a little bit more of an insight, with people that are smarter than us in certain fields to be able to help us out with shit like this, and even coming at this from a skepticism point of view. It's appreciated that you even agreed to come on. So that's a big deal.
Thank you. Yeah,
So,
I'm happy that you guys had me on, and I'm happy to discuss these things. It's just a fun topic that I think is interesting and fun to talk about and entertain and try to shed some light or add some value in any way. So I just appreciate your guys' time and for having me on. It was a pleasure.
So, just a word of note for this episode. With all of the ideas that were discussed with Paul, I wanted to give an update on the most plausible theory that we threw at him, and to let you know that Josh and I are both experimenting with ferrofluid. We did find what Paul called toys in the closest state that we are looking to experiment with this very unique fluid with. Josh and I have both started experiments with the ferrofluid, and it seems that Paul's theory is correct. We will need something to amplify the very subtle changes that we see in the electromagnetic field. Nothing has come to fruition as of yet, but yet we will always continue to experiment as we learn more about the paranormal field, and we encourage you to do the same thing. Until next time.
That was frickin' awesome. Thanks for listening to this totally randomly placed bonus episode. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, check the show notes wherever you listen to the Stories in the Cemetery podcast and connect with them. Are you doing something to the paranormal field as badass as our guest? Want to come chat and brag about your innovations? Reach out to us at storiesinthecemetery@gmail.com with subject line podcast guest, and we'll reach out if you can pique our interest. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss these random bonus episodes.